Anne of Avonlea. Chapter 1. Anne Shirley is trying to study Virgil on the front step of Green Gables on a gorgeous August afternoon when a chaotic little Jersey cow escapes and wrecks Mr. J.A. Harrison's oat field. Mr. Harrison, their newly moved, cranky neighbor from New Brunswick who lives entirely alone and owns a notoriously foul-mouthed parrot named Ginger, storms over in a total rage to complain to Marilla. Because Marilla is away, Anne steps up and takes the full force of his temper, leading to a fiery war of words where Anne snaps back about his bald head. After he storms off, Anne gets the cow locked up, but later that evening, Mrs. Rachel Lynde drops by to spill all the piping hot neighborhood tea about new residents, including the impending arrival of orphan children named Davy and Dora and a boy named Paul Irving from the States, all while warning Anne that her new Village Improvement Society is going to cause total chaos. Chapter 2. The next afternoon, Anne and Diana Barry go on a shopping trip to Carmody, chatting excitedly about upgrading the Avonlea Hall and clearing out town eyesores like the old Bolter house. But when they get back, they are horrified to see the same mischievous Jersey cow standing right in the middle of Mr. Harrison's lush oats again. In a panic to prevent Mr. Harrison from finding out, Anne chases the cow through the wet field like an absolute madwoman. Right at that exact moment, Mr. Shearer and his son drive by and make a joke about buying the cow, so impulsive Anne instantly sells her on the spot for $20. When Marilla gets home and Anne realizes the catastrophic plot twist, that the cow she just sold to Mr. Shearer was actually Mr. Harrison's other cow that had wandered into their pasture, she panics, grabs her $20, and packs a pink iced walnut cake as a peace offering to face her doom. Chapter 3. Anne nervously marches over to Mr. Harrison's house, totally dreading the absolute disaster waiting for her. When she arrives, Mr. Harrison nervously tries to act chill and polite, but his chaotic parrot Ginger immediately ruins the vibe by screaming, "Bless my soul, what's that red-headed snippet coming here for?" Red-faced and completely humbled, Anne has to swallow her pride, deal with the profanity-laced bird, and figure out how to explain to her weird neighbor that she accidentally sold his prized cow to a random guy heading to Charlottetown. To her shock, Mr. Harrison completely forgives her, tells her not to stress, and happily accepts her peace offering of a pink iced walnut cake. They end up bonding over tea and laughing about her school plans, turning a terrifying confrontation into a surprisingly wholesome hangout session where Anne realizes he isn't so bad after all. Chapter 4. On the evening before the first day of school, Anne, Jane Andrews, and Gilbert Blythe are hanging out by a spruce-shaded fence near the Birch Path, passionately debating teacher etiquette and school discipline. While practical Jane and partially swayed Gilbert argue that corporal punishment is occasionally necessary to keep order, Anne stands firmly on her lofty principles, vowing to never lay a finger on a student and insisting she will govern entirely through pure affection and winning their hearts. After parting ways, Anne walks home through the gorgeous, fern-scented twilight, dodging Mrs. Lynde's scorching, unsolicited advice and running over to chat with Mr. Harrison instead, who naturally trash-talks her idealistic teaching theories. Anne goes to bed feeling low-key stressed and terrified about the next morning, prompting Marilla to force-feed her a cup of hot ginger tea to calm her down. Chapter 5. Anne arrives at school terrified and completely blanks on her meticulously prepared opening speech, awkwardly telling the kids to open their testaments instead while she silently catalogs her new students. Among them are the hostile and sullen Anthony Pye, a flashy, overdressed girl named Clarice Almira Donnell, and a magical, soul-connected 10-year-old boy named Paul Irving with whom she instantly shares a silent kindred spirit bond. The school day goes relatively smoothly aside from Morley Andrews getting caught racing trained crickets, which Anne later frees in Violet Vale, and Anthony Pye remaining completely immune to her sweet lectures about being gentlemen. Just as Anne is about to spiral into post-school exhaustion and self-doubt, Mrs. H.B. Donnell aggressively struts into the classroom like a fashion plate nightmare to throw a tantrum over how Anne pronounced her last name and why her son Jacob refuses to use his fancy preferred name, St. Clair. Anne manages to escape this chaotic interaction and walks down the Birch Path, where little Paul Irving gifts her a cluster of wild orchids, instantly dissolving her weariness and filling her heart with hope. Later that evening, Mrs. Lynde stops by to report that every child except Anthony Pye loved their new teacher, while also gossiping about Mrs. Donnell's eccentric habits. Chapter 6. Anne and Diana set out on a gorgeous, crisp September day to canvass the Newbridge Road on behalf of the newly formed Avonlea Village Improvement Society, AVIS, to raise funds for reshining and painting the local hall. Along the way, they deal with a hilariously eccentric cast of local cranks and residents. They endure the gloomy pessimism of the Andrews sisters, though Catherine sneakily manages to donate from her egg money, rescue a trapped, apron-wearing, henpecked Mr. Daniel Blair by baking a cake for him, and survive Mrs. Theodore White's immaculate obsession with cleanliness by walking across a path completely paved with newspapers. After pushing through some rough rejections and closed doors at Simon Fletcher's, their luck turns around with generous Sloan donations. Hearing neighborhood gossip about Lorenzo White finally having a baby boy after 7 girls, Anne seizes the opportunity to detour to his house where a euphoric Lorenzo immediately drops a $5 donation. Through all the neighborhood snubs and quirky encounters, the girls successfully navigate their mission, proving that the Improvement Society is ready to leave its mark on Avonlea. Chapter 7. Anne is struggling to write down her thoughts as Professor Hamilton advised, finding that fancies are too wayward to cage on white paper. She vents to Gilbert about her ongoing battle to win over Anthony Pye, who still treats her with scornful contempt, while gushing over the brilliant Paul Irving. Gilbert shares his own goals of becoming a doctor to fight disease and ignorance, contrasting with Anne's dream of bringing beauty and joy into the world. Later, Marilla returns home, deeply worried about her sick third cousin, Mary Keith, and the bleak fate of her 6-year-old twins, Dora and Davy. Using Marilla's strict devotion to duty as leverage, Anne successfully convinces her to adopt the twins for the winter, despite knowing she will have to shoulder the sewing burden herself. Chapter 8. Marilla finally brings the 6-year-old twins, Dora and Davy, home to Green Gables after their mother's funeral, surviving a chaotic ride where Davy nearly dives under the pony's heels. While Dora is a well-behaved, starched little lady, Davy is a hyperactive menace who immediately starts pulling hair, stealing cake, and terrorizing the household. On Sunday, Davy drops a furry caterpillar down Loretta White's neck during church, causing a massive disruption that mortifies Anne and forces Marilla to ground him. Later in the week, Davy tricks poor Dora into walking the pig rinse fence, making her fall into the pig pen and then hosing her down under the pump, earning himself another trip to bed without supper. Anne talks to Davy, who feels genuinely remorseful and confesses to hiding a toad in Marilla's bed, prompting Anne to frantically rescue the creature before Marilla finds it. Chapter 9. Mr. Harrison complains to Anne about Mrs. Rachel Lynde badgering him for a vestry carpet subscription, prompting Anne to lecture him on his habit of exclusively telling the harsh parts of the truth and neglecting people's good qualities. Meanwhile, the AVIS is thriving, having raised more than enough money from successful subscriptions to fully paint the hall and shingle the roof. However, a massive color code mix-up between John Andrew Pye and Roger Pye results in Joshua Pye painting the hall a blinding, cart-wheelbarrow blue instead of green, sending the community into a frenzy. Public outrage eventually shields the improvers from blame and turns local sympathy in their favor, earning them supportive promises for future beautification projects like geranium beds and cleared roadside stumps. Chapter 10. Anne enjoys her peaceful walk home through the birch path while daydreaming about being a queen or a wood elf. But upon arriving at Green Gables, she discovers a frantic Marilla searching for the missing Dora. A terrifying search of the deep well leaves everyone panicked until Davy slips away to Mr. Harrison's tool house and is caught out for having locked Dora inside as a prank while lying about it completely. When Anne confronts him, Davy breaks down in tears because he genuinely did not know that lying was wrong, having learned the behavior from the Sprott children. After Davy is sent to bed without supper, Anne and Marilla share a good laugh when Davy naively accuses Marilla of also being a liar for warning him that divine retribution would strike if he skipped his prayers. Chapter 11. Anne writes a passionate letter to her Queen's Academy chum Stella, detailing the chaos and comedic gold of teaching, sharing hilarious student quotes like Jimmy Andrews comparing Speckle to St. Clair Donnell's freckled face, along with wild student wishes and unedited essays, including an iconic letter from Ned Clay about his cat William, and another from Annetta Bell that accidentally plagiarized a 19th century love letter from her mother's top bureau drawer, all before highlighting the rich, imaginative rock and sunset stories told by her favorite student, Paul Irving. Chapter 12. Anne wakes up with a throbbing toothache and a terrible mood, taking out her misery on her students through a brutally fast-paced day until she mistakenly throws a parcel of St. Clair Donnell's firecrackers into the stove, thinking they are Mrs. Hiram's illegal nutcakes, causing an absolute explosion that terrifies the classroom, shatters nerves, and ends with Anne tragically losing her temper and whipping Anthony Pye for planting a mouse in her desk, only to feel massive remorse until a snowy morning brings a surprising truce when Anthony offers to carry her books and admits her whipping was just as good as a man's. Chapter 13. Anne celebrates her belated birthday by treating Diana, Jane, and Priscilla to a magical, sun-drenched Saturday woodland hike where the girls explore blossoming cherry lanes, name a hidden forest pool Crystal Lake, and weave wild cherry blossoms into their hair. They discover the long-forgotten narcissus-carpeted garden of Hester Gray, a tragic young Yankee bride who died of consumption 4 decades prior after spending her final years finding peace and happiness in Avonlea, and conclude their idyllic day by eating dainties by a gurgling brook, leaving Anne with a deeply enriched, poetic soul. Chapter 14. Anne shares exciting news that Marilla's eye specialist predicts she will retain her sight, though she can no longer do fine work, while the AVIS is thrown into total chaos when Gertie Pye announces that Judson Parker plans to rent his Newbridge roadside fences out to a patent medicine company for hideous advertisements. After an initial appeal by Anne, Jane, and Diana fails because Judson refuses to let sentiment stand in the way of money, Anne accidentally overhears Corcoran bribing Judson with an agricultural Harrow note in exchange for his political vote, prompting a panicked Judson to completely cave and grant the Village Improvement Society their wish just to ensure the scandalous bribery never leaks. Chapter 15. Anne locks up the schoolhouse for a well-earned 2-month summer vacation after being re-engaged for the next term, immediately visiting Matthew's grave and meeting her sensitive, imaginative student, Paul Irving, a young boy raised by his strict grandmother who lost his mother 3 years prior and eagerly awaits a birthday surprise from his distant father, Stephen Irving. Anne and Paul bond deeply over their shared love for the realm of imagination, after which Anne walks home with Mrs. Allen, discussing the true meaning of ideals, past regrets over her momentary loss of temper when whipping Anthony Pye, and the pure beauty of genuine friendship. Chapter 16. Anne receives a wildly exciting letter from Priscilla, stating that the famous author Mrs. Morgan is visiting Prince Edward Island and will drive up to visit Green Gables with Priscilla on Thursday. Anne immediately dives into frantic, meticulous preparation by planning a decadent, multi-course menu featuring homemade cream of onion soup, 2 sacrificed white roosters, and lemon pie, while also managing Davy Keith's hilarious theological panic after classmate Milty Boulter convinces him that heaven is actually located in Simon Fletcher's attic. Chapter 17. Anne and Diana spend a radiant Thursday morning transforming the Green Gables parlor into a stunning, flower-filled bower for the anticipated literary icon Charlotte E. Morgan. But the visit is thwarted when the author sprains her ankle in Toronto, leaving Anne to deal with a disastrous sequence of events including Davy accidentally destroying her homemade lemon pies, a sugar mishap ruining the dinner peas, and a clumsy conch shell fall that shatters Miss Barry's precious $20 Willowware platter. Chapter 18. Anne goes on a desperate platter hunting expedition to the remote, solitary Spencervale Highway known as the Tory Road with Diana to replace the broken heirloom, leading to a comical and humiliating disaster where Anne climbs a shaky lath duckhouse roof to peek into Miss Sarah Copp's pantry window, crashes through the laths up to her armpits, sits through a heavy rainstorm writing a garden idyll on wrapping paper while pinned in place, and finally gets freed with an axe before successfully negotiating to buy the coveted Willowware platter for $20. After managing to purchase the Willowware platter from Miss Sarah Copp for $25, Anne and Diana share a triumphant laugh on the Tory Road while reflecting on the unexpected engagement of Miss Sarah to Luther Wallace after 20 years apart, with Anne finally returning home safely to Green Gables with the prized dish intact. Chapter 19. Anne enjoys a peaceful late August day boating with the twins and visiting Paul Irving at the old Irving place where she shares tea, listens to his whimsical thoughts about fairies and dryads, and later meets Gilbert Blythe at the Dryads Bubble, where they discuss the successful roadside improvement projects of the Avonlea Village Improvement Society. Chapter 20. Anne's frantic morning chores of shifting feathers are upended when Priscilla Grant, a wealthy friend, and the real Mrs. Charlotte E. Morgan, mistakenly identified earlier as a different visitor, suddenly arrive at Green Gables while Anne is covered in down and wearing a stained, bee-feathered dress, forcing her to heroically rise to the occasion before her friend Diana arrives with a chicken dinner to rescue the menu, after which Anne discovers her nose has been accidentally dyed bright red by freckle lotion, leading to a delightful afternoon of storytelling and walks with her distinguished guests. Chapter 21. Anne and Diana take a shortcut through the blazing October woods to visit friends, but a wrong turn leads them down the Tory Road to Echo Lodge, a romantic sandstone cottage belonging to Miss Lavender Lewis, a sweet, snow-haired, and charmingly eccentric woman of 45 who lives with her faithful young helper, Charlotta IV, and delights in pretending to host imaginary tea parties, treating the girls to a magical evening of delightful food and fairy echoes before Anne inadvertently touches upon the past by mentioning little Paul Irving, whose father, Stephen Irving, had once been engaged to Miss Lavender. Chapter 22. Anne and Marilla discuss Miss Lavender's youthful beauty and unique charm over breakfast, while constantly keeping tabs on Davy's table manners, as Anne reflects on how some people like Miss Lavender never truly grow old and how her quaint, imaginative spirit brings a touch of magic to Avonlea. Chapter 23. Anne decides to walk through the beachlands to Echo Lodge on a chilly December evening to visit Miss Lavender Lewis, an eccentric, snow-haired, and charmingly imaginative spinster of 45 who lives with her intensely wide-smiling, loyal young helper named Charlotta IV. Upon arrival, Miss Lavender, who looks like a fairy queen in a red gown and silvery shawl, greets Anne with ultimate vibes, complaining that she feels stuck in middle age while Anne gets to stunt with youth. They cook, make candy, and spill tea before Miss Lavender drops absolute lore about her past. She was engaged 25 years before to Stephen Irving, but after a petty, toxic argument and a stubborn refusal to apologize, they broke it off for good. Despite a broken heart, Miss Lavender learned to cope and stays upbeat. A month later, Anne brings Stephen Irving's son, Paul Irving, a sweet, imaginative boy who is literally a chip off the old block, to meet Miss Lavender. The two instantly vibe, and Paul sweetly asks Miss Lavender for a goodbye kiss, making her a new bestie and cementing a wholesome connection between the old flames' lives. Chapter May 24th arrives with Avonlea residents buzzing over observer notes in the local paper written by Gilbert Blythe and Anne, which playfully hint at local gossip and predict a massive storm by weatherman Uncle Abe. The Avonlea improvers plant 200 ornamental trees, while Marilla gives Davy his own garden plot to channel his chaotic energy, though Davy keeps digging up his plants to check on the roots and grubs. Suddenly, on May 23rd, an unseasonably warm day turns apocalyptic as a terrifying, dead black cloud with livid white edges rolls in from the northwest. Anne quickly dismisses school, and as she rushes home with Davy and Dora, a catastrophic hailstone storm hits with the force of an earthquake. Giant hailstones smash windows, shatter the landscape into a foot-deep white wasteland, and destroy the young trees and orchards completely. After the apocalyptic weather clears, neighbors check on each other, and Mr. Harrison arrives to report that a lightning strike destroyed his chimney and tragically killed Ginger, his pet parrot, leaving everyone shaken by the historic disaster. Chapter 25. A fortnight after the great hailstorm, Anne is dismayed that only 2 blighted white narcissus blossoms survive to adorn Matthew's grave. But her melancholy is instantly shattered when an express wagon delivers a stylish, rosy-cheeked woman wearing a wonderful beflowered and beplumed bonnet. The stranger announces herself as Mrs. Emily Harrison, the long-absent wife of Mr. James A. Harrison, and she is furious to discover her husband has been masquerading as a bachelor in Avonlea, though she takes immediate comfort upon learning his profane parrot, Ginger, is dead. Mrs. Lynde investigates the scandal and uncovers the full backstory. James A. and Emily had separated years prior over relentless nagging, bad grammar, and Sir Tao, Ginger's scandalous vocabulary. However, upon her arrival, Emily cleans the house and cooks a stellar dinner, leading a relieved Mr. Harrison to happily reconcile with her. Anne reflects on how a simple joke in Gilbert's Observer notes accidentally brought a husband and wife back together, while Mrs. Lynde notes that Gilbert Blythe has resigned from White Sands and will head off to college in the fall. Chapter 26. Thomas Lynde passes away quietly, which leaves Mrs. Rachel Lynde heartbroken and grieving until Marilla Cuthbert devises a genius plan to invite Mrs. Rachel to move into Green Gables so Marilla won't be lonely and Anne Shirley can finally pursue her education at Redmond College. Anne feels totally dazed with joy at the prospect of college, realizing her long-held dreams are finally within reach, even as she feels a bit sad about leaving her beloved pupils, including Paul Irving and her cute students. Mrs. Rachel gratefully accepts the home offer to live at Green Gables, though she decides to stay in her own house for the summer until her farm is sold in the fall. Gossip spreads around Avonlea about Marilla's bold move, but Marilla and Mrs. Rachel establish clear boundaries to live in total harmony. Meanwhile, Gilbert Blythe is thrilled to hear Anne is resigning from teaching to go to college, while Diana Barry is feeling super pessimistic about her and Gilbert both leaving, plus the impending departure of Mr. and Mrs. Allen to Charlottetown. Anne and Diana share a deep twilight heart-to-heart in the East Gable where they discuss various town affairs, the memory of little Hester Gray, and a dramatic piece of gossip about Ruby Gillis rejecting Nelson Atkins because his romantic proposal matched a script verbatim out of The Complete Guide to Etiquette. Diana also grills Anne seriously about her true feelings for Gilbert, but Anne insists she only views him strictly as a friend, remaining totally committed to her dramatic ideals of romance while cherishing her unbreakable, lifelong friendship with Diana above all else. Chapter 27 kicks off with Davy asking Anne where she is going, all dressed up in a gorgeous new pale green muslin dress, the very first color she has worn since Matthew's tragic passing. Anne heads out to Echo Lodge with Paul Irving, while back at home, Davy gets into a hilarious scuffle with Marilla regarding his bad manners and his love for Mrs. Harrison's cookies and cake scrapings, prompting Marilla to retreat to the cellar hatch to laugh out loud. When Anne and Paul arrive at the stone house, they are greeted by Miss Lavender Lewis and her loyal, quirky handmaiden Charlotta IV, who are both busy weeding and trimming the stunning garden. Miss Lavender is all gay and sweet in her favorite frills and laces, and she immediately treats them to an impromptu snack party filled with wonderful food and delightful conversation. Paul spends time running down to the dike to make delightful experiments with the magical echoes across the river, while Anne and Miss Lavender sit on the stone bench under the silver poplar to talk about the future. Miss Lavender admits with a tinge of wistfulness that she feels horribly, selfishly sorry that Anne is leaving for college in the fall, expressing a temporary wave of melancholy about lost hopes and dreams before snapping right back to cheerfulness when Charlotta IV reports that the northeast corner of Mr. John Kimball's pasture is absolutely overflowing with early strawberries. Anne and Charlotta IV head over to pick the delicious berries for tea under the silver poplar, and along the way, the devoted handmaiden confides her deep worries to Anne about Miss Lavender's unusually fragile health and low spirits lately, setting up a touching atmospheric finish to their sun-drenched afternoon. Chapter 28 covers the end of the school term, featuring a triumphant semi-annual examination where Anne's pupils impress everyone and gift her an address and a writing desk, while local gossips like Mrs. Harmon Andrews, Mrs. Peter Sloan, and Mrs. William Bell discuss community updates including Jane's teaching success and Mr. Allen's upcoming departure for Charlottetown. Anne feels heartbroken over parting with her students, realizing the deep mutual lessons they shared, though she finds comfort in the romantic milestone of a closed chapter. Early in her vacation, Anne spends a fortnight at Echo Lodge helping Miss Lavender prepare for her future, and during a visit to the Shore Road, she is stunned when Paul excitedly introduces his father, Stephen Irving, a tall, handsome, iron-gray hero of romance. Mr. Irving thanks Anne for her incredible positive influence on Paul's life. The next morning, Anne excitedly delivers Mr. Irving's message to Miss Lavender, who reacts with a mix of shock and quiet emotion. That evening, Mr. Irving arrives at the stone house, and while Anne and Charlotta IV anxiously wait in the kitchen, cleaning silver spoons, they eventually spot Mr. Irving walking with his arm around Miss Lavender's waist in the garden, confirming a joyful upcoming wedding. Chapter 29. Avonlea is an intense whirlwind of excitement leading up to Miss Lavender's wedding, where Anne helps finalize dress fittings and coordinates the guest list, while also accidentally stumbling upon a major piece of romance in the Barry garden as she discovers Diana Barry and Fred Wright secretly engaged. Anne reflects on how fast everyone is growing up and feels a bittersweet pang of realization that things are changing forever, even as she jokingly teases Diana about her plans for 37 crocheted doilies. Anne then retreats to her own room to construct a dreamy home ode dreams in her imagination, finding herself mildly annoyed yet strangely unable to prevent Gilbert Blythe's image from stubbornly crashing her daydreams. Meanwhile, Mr. Harrison enjoys his newly negotiated smoking privileges outdoors, and the final preparations for the wedding are set into motion with the arrival of the last week of August. Chapter 30 covers the long-awaited wedding day at Echo Lodge, where Anne, Diana, and Charlotta IV frantically prep the stone house in the gardens amidst fears of bad weather, until the sun dramatically bursts through the clouds, right as Miss Lavender Lewis and Stephen Irving are pronounced husband and wife. The guests celebrate the joyful ceremony, and after the newlyweds depart for a Pacific Coast trip on the 6 o'clock train, Paul Irving gives the ultimate send-off by ringing a massive brass dinner bell while the river echoes chime like fairy wedding bells in the distance. Anne and Charlotta IV return to clean up the deserted house and secure the blinds, after which Anne sits under the silver poplar to wait for Gilbert Blythe. As Gilbert walks her home down the dark lane, he gently hints at a future together, prompting Anne to blush and momentarily lift the veil on her inner consciousness as she officially turns the page from girlhood into womanhood, leaving the little stone house peacefully waiting for future summers of life and laughter.